Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy, the first FaceTime for 2013. Well, I got to tell you, I had a terrific Christmas vacation. It was absolutely great. It was 10 days with the family, and everybody was there. My Klingon son flew in from Chicago late on Christmas Eve, was with us on Christmas Day, but had to fly back, of course, to Chicago the day after Christmas because he had a performance the next night. Had to make sure he got there, but it was great, and boy, I got to tell you, I love having an actor in the family. It's just terrific. During the time, it was 10 days off, basically, and I had a lot of fun. In addition to spending time with the family, I saw 4 movies and read 3 books, and it was just great. I'll write about some of that stuff tomorrow on Offbeat. But one of the other pleasures I had during that time was to watch some of the DVD set that I got, the 8th and final season of Mannix. Now, Mannix is a detective series that ran on CBS back in the late 60s and early 70s, and as I've written here before, I loved Mannix. I was an enormous Mannix fan. So it's been a lot of fun to watch this season, particularly because I don't think I've ever seen these episodes before. It's the last season of Mannix. CBS had moved it to a Tuesday night, and quite frankly, I was in college in Los Angeles. I had other things shaking on Tuesday nights, like class, and I don't think I've seen any of these episodes before. So it's a lot of fun to go back and watch them. And it is sort of like going back in a time machine because, I mean, first of all, the production values are very rooted in that time, and the haircuts and the wardrobe are just awful. They're just awful. I can't believe people dressed like that back then. Hell, I probably dressed something like that back then and certainly had hair like that. But while I've been watching it, I've realized that there's a business lesson. Let me explain. Now, on most movies and television shows, there's a continuity person. And that continuity person doesn't always have an easy job because basically movies and TV shows, for the most part, are shot out of sequence, right? So what happens is they may shoot part of a scene in a room on Monday, and they may go back and shoot the other part of the scene in that same room on Friday. And so the continuity person has to make sure that everything matches, even though there's been 3 or 4 days in between. It's their job to make sure everything matches. Now, apparently they didn't have a continuity person on Mannix, or at least that person wasn't paying as close attention as they should have, because there are scenes where the continuity is just awful. Right? What happens at some points is Mannix will be kicking down a door, and as he kicks down the door, he'll be wearing a plaid sports jacket. He'll go into the room, he'll be wearing a tweed sports jacket. Then when he comes out of the room, he's wearing the plaid sports jacket once again. There are scenes where he's in cars, and you know, he's wearing different outfits at various points in the drive. There's one scene where he parks the car, and it's a Dodge Challenger. And when he comes back to get back in the car, it's a blue Camaro. The Challenger was something they had from earlier seasons, and I think they just got it screwed up. So it's fascinating when these things happen. What's interesting to me about that is that when they were doing the show, I'm sure the producers saw these gaffes. I'm sure they were aware of it. But I'm sure at some point they looked at each other and said, you know, let's not worry about it. First of all, people are watching these shows on very, very small televisions. Some of them are watching it in black and white. It's going to go by so quickly. Even if they notice it, they have no way of going back and checking it. And maybe they'll catch it on a rerun, but nobody's really ever going to think about it. Let's not worry about it. Let's save money. Let's move on. And the producers had no way of knowing back then in the late 70s that I would be here in 2013 watching these episodes on one enormous flat screen HD TV. I'm watching the discs on Blu-ray players. I can see everything. I can see every little mistake. I can stop it. I can back up. I can do whatever I want to do. And they had no way of knowing that. And I think that's a really important business lesson because, you know, we can't always just think about the short term when we make business decisions. We have to think about the long term. We have to think about repercussions. We have to think about implications. Now listen, I know that there's no way the producers ever could have envisioned in 1972 or 73 or 74 things like flat screen televisions and Blu-ray DVD players, right? That would have been amazing to them. That would have been over on Star Trek, not on Mannix, which were shot on the same lot, as it happens. They couldn't have thought about that. But in our businesses, we have to. Technology changes, culture changes, people change, expectations change, and we have to think long term. We can't just think short term and say, okay, let's let it go by. It doesn't matter. We'll save a few bucks. We'll move on. Nobody will notice. These days, everybody notices everything. And that's a really important business lesson. Now, here's a little irony. The first season of Mannix, which is a season that almost nobody has seen or remembers, actually had a very different setup than seasons 2 through 8, when he was sort of a traditional detective working out of his own office with a secretary. The first season of Mannix, he was actually part of a much bigger detective firm. The firm was called Intertect, and everybody in that firm, with the exception of Mannix, relied on computers to figure out what all the bad guys were doing and to help them determine what their next moves were. Mannix, he was a two-fisted kind of guy. He figured he could fight it out. He just trusted the computers. After one season, the producers decided to go to a more traditional private eye setup because they said, there's really no future in that whole man versus computer scenario. What are the odds that that's going to have any resonance to anybody in the long term? Little did they know. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this Thursday morning. Again, Happy New Year. As always, I'm looking forward to hearing what is on your mind.